So
Okay, Alex, over to you.
Yeah, the question is, what's the keyboard shortcut to start your slides? That's the question. Bear with me a second.
Slideshow.
Good work. Right. Thanks everyone for having me. I was flattered and surprised to be asked to present about this. So I'll do my best to do it within the time allowed. So I'm going to speak to you today about a story that came out earlier this year that I worked on. It's about the National Police Chiefs Council and its Central Referral Unit. And in the spirit of FOI, my own full disclosure, I'd never heard of this unit before last year. I'm a general news reporter. I've used FOI a lot over my career, and when I first set out to submit FOIs to police forces around the UK, what I was actually asking about was about crime logs involving synthetic opioids, which are super strength synthetic opioid drugs. They're called nitazines, and I was interested to find out what crimes have been recorded. I was aware from previous reporting that these drugs were being cut with street heroin and fake medicines. For those that are interested in this sort of topic, like benzos that are often used by people. That's sort of, when I say fake medicines, that's normally what I mean. As I said, I'd submitted freedom of information requests to every police force around the UK. I sort of toyed with whether I should repeat the exact words of the FOI request, but I thought, since it was very boring, I would try and keep this slide brief. But I asked for records of every incident that the police forces had recorded for the financial year to date. This was being submitted in January, so a slightly unusual time frame maybe, but there was reasoning for me putting it in at that time. I used the words, I asked for keyword searches, synthetic opioid, nitazene, fentanyl as well, because fentanyl is obviously of interest in the US opioid crisis. And I named these different analogues, i.e. versions or chemical versions of nitazines, which within a few days of my request actually were reclassified as Class A drugs. But this presentation isn't about my reporting on synthetic opioids. It's actually about the fact that I put in a freedom of information request for this particular topic, and then what happened in the ensuing months was something completely different, something I wasn't expecting, that I just stumbled across. And on the back of my responses, my reaction to it, using further freedom of information requests and subject access requests to find out about why what happened with my responses and why information was blocked from release. So I'm sorry if this is a very word heavy slide, but I thought this needs a timeline to make this make sense. This needs a chronology. So January 2024, I made FOI requests to all of the police forces for crime logs involving nitazines. By February 2024, I've had responses from 27 police forces, and I've got 27 responses which have disclosed data. And then March 2024, this is where things start getting a bit interesting. 13 police forces emailed me in exactly the same week, and they'd already disclosed data, and they said they wanted to replace their previous erroneous response with a no confirm, no deny response. So just to be clear, I've already got data from those 13 forces, and they want to change the published response to a no confirm, no deny response. And then 16 forces in total followed that same approach. Now, the wording of the response from it was already extremely suspicious to me to have 13 forces email me in the same week suggesting this change of approach. What made it more suspicious was the fact that the wording of their emails was so strikingly similar to one another. So I don't often follow this approach, but I've used it more in recent years because it's proved revelatory. I submitted what some people call a meta request. So I asked for correspondence under freedom of information laws about the handling of the FOI response to me. And I also submitted subject access requests to the police forces that had tried to rescind their data to try and find out why they'd done that, why they'd made that decision. As I start to receive, a lot of PDFs, I can see that the correspondence disclosed, it tells me that Norfolk Constabulary referred my original FOI request about synthetic opioids to an organisation called the National Police Chiefs Council's Central Referral Unit. As I said at the start of this, I'd never heard of that unit before. But Norfolk had not referred that for until 21 working days after it had been submitted. So it looks from the correspondence in any case that I'm going to call it the CRU for shorthand, if that makes sense with everyone, or I can say MPCC if that's clearer. I'll say CRU. The CRU had decided in the correspondence disclosed. I can see what's been sent back to the forces. I can see that this CRU has told the forces this is a national request. Advice will follow in due course. Bear in mind that I've already had the responses from 27 forces to this FOI request. And the CRU says national request, advice will follow in due course. And the CRU tells forces that the response will be a no confirm, no deny, because the effect of local forces disclosing information about their crime logs involving nitazines will allow organised criminals to form a picture through the mosaic effect. They will allow it to form a picture of what investigations are happening, what investigations are not happening, etc., etc. The correspondence also revealed, this is obviously over a period of months, the correspondence also reveals that Nottinghamshire Police had also not only asked for advice about the FOI response, but they'd also asked for the response to my subject's access request, so that it was also being consistent in applying the CRU logic. And the CRU tells Nottinghamshire Police in response, nothing should, I've put my own emphasis in italics and in bold here, nothing should be in scope of my subject access request, because Nottinghamshire Police should be using an applicant blind approach to FOI requests. And then, as I'll go on to explain, around this same time, around April 2024, the CRU has received an email from the press office of the National Police Chiefs Council to say, so Alex from BBC has asked this. I know this sounds it's probably a bit hard to follow because there's different recipients of different FOI requests and subject access requests. But to be clear, at this point, by April of 2024, I've only submitted FOI requests to police forces and subject access requests to police forces. And I've got National Police Chiefs Council's press office asking another arm of the National Police Chiefs Council, the CRU, about FOI requests that I've made to other organisations, other external organisations. My question here as a reporter and remains is, why is the press office asking about my FOIs to other public organisations? And I'll just leave that there. It's interesting in the context of the CRU advising a police force, nothing should be in scope because your FOI process should be applicant blind. And yet somehow a press office within that same organisation knows that I've made FOI requests to police forces. This is the CRU advice that came out in the correspondence request. I'll read a bit of it. I won't read all of it because it will take forever, but this is a national request and the current national position is no reference is made to the number of deaths or number of investigations, which will include incidents regarding synthetic opioids as described. And then I mentioned about the mosaic effect and how this could, this could lead to a map or a, sort of information being put together by organised criminals who, there is it's a moot point whether organised criminals spend a lot of time scouring FOI disclosure logs, but I'll leave that there. The response will be a full no confirm, no deny, obviously, and then the sections exemptions cited. And then this is the interesting point in relation to the timeline I mentioned. For those forces that have already made a response not in accordance with the full NC/ND, you will need to contact the applicant and acknowledge that the initial response was erroneous and issue a new response in keeping with the national guidance, so it does not undermine the principles of using the no confirm, no deny by all forces. Making the response erroneous will ensure there is no further recourse against this response under the FOIA of FOIA by the applicant. To assist, a form of words is attached for the harm and public interest test. Please ensure this is made force specific and any local factors are included before release. Well, from reading them, I can confirm that very few forces made it force specific and very few local factors were included before release. It was very much a copy and paste from most forces. The correspondence also revealed these sorts of exchanges within police forces. I've just named the force at the top because I don't want to sort of group libel people, but this is within Wiltshire Police. And this is on a Teams call, Teams messaging between colleagues. And I got an email this morning from CRU, one I sent out in Feb, needs to be no confirmed, no denied. I've not had to retract one yet. Luckily, I've already got a call with redacted on Monday morning, so I'm just going to hold on to it all till then. Once it's gone, once it's gone, it's gone. I highly doubt the person is going to happily hand it back and accept, and no confirm, no deny law. So that one will probably be what it is. Retraction one was about drugs, but they wanted a wild card, redacted. So I don't understand how the second part of that sentence could be redacted, because the first part I can understand because that's clearly personal data. It looks like from the context it's going to be a name, but the second half of the final sentence just seems like that's just mildly embarrassing and has been redacted for that reason. Warwickshire Police, their correspondence, another Teams chat. We exempted his request, but it's odd he wants all the emails pertaining to his FOIs. What did he think he's going to find? We exempted his and then they're sort of moaning about my date range I haven't supplied. That's a deliberate decision, by the way. We exempted his request, but it's odd he wants all the emails pertaining to his FOIs. What do you think he's going to find? It's because he had a response, and it's underneath the overtype, but it was, I think it says retracted and a new one sent on 129. He was trying to determine why this has happened, and when we responded to the reference, he had a redacted copy of the advice that CRU circulated that led to the new response being sent. So that should have satisfied it. Not sure what else he's trying to get. Maybe just to see when else CRU advised on the responses to FOIs he has submitted. The Warwickshire Police were, the person talking on this Teams call was exactly right. It's exactly what I'm trying to find out. That's of course I'm trying to find out why CRU are advising on responses. I don't know if you guys use these, but I just have a spreadsheet that I keep for keeping on top of FOI requests. So you'll see here that I've got, these are the named forces. Again, just to avoid group libel, I thought I'd actually include the names of the forces that sent retracted responses and when they sent them. You'll see the amended dates. As I said, 13 forces replied in the same week. You'll actually see that a lot of them replied on the same day, which again is a massive red flag to me, as I sort of wonder why they would all reply on the same date. You know, people in my thought process, rightly or wrongly, I'm thinking they're acting independently of one another, and yet this is a lot of forces sending stuff to me on the same day with suspiciously similar wording. As I said, we're going to need a timeline to understand this long-winded, protracted story gathering process or report, investigation, whatever you like to call it. So, after never having heard about the CRU in my life up to this point, I obviously had no reason to FOI the MPCC until I saw all the responses from these police forces mentioning this arm of the MPCC that I'd never heard of. So the MPCC itself is subject to FOI, so I submitted an FOI to the MPCC with I actually submitted a subject access request. And I limited the date range because I thought I'm interested. I'm not sure how much information they have. I'm not sure how big their records are. And I've never asked for a subject access request to the MPCC about myself. So it's what some people would probably call a fishing expedition, but I know something is there. I know that they've been talking to the police forces about me. So I've given a date range of the early part of 2024 when forces are sending me retracted FOIs, and I've asked for their information held about me in that period. And I've also asked a separate FOI. I've asked for all of the instances when CRU has given advice to forces about responding under FOI. I go through several iterations of this FOI, several refinements, or whatever phrase you like to use. And on Christmas Eve, I get my response to my fourth iteration of this FOI that has not been. This is the first one that's received a full response. All the others were exempted for cost reasons. And I've been given over 3 months. I've been given the figures for how many times the CRU has advised forces on FOI responses. And the 3 months that I've chosen, and deliberately the 3 months, I've gone for 3 months that cover the period where I asked them for information about synthetic opioid related crimes. And once I have those figures, and I know it's a more widespread issue than just talking about my FOI, I start to wonder, well, is it just journalists that are, people who I know who submit FOIs a lot in their work? Have they ever heard of the CRU? Have they got an experience like I've had? I've never done this before either, but just for the purposes of this slideshow, I used ChatGPT and asked it to create an image to visualize the idea of the MPCC CRU blocking the release of information under freedom of information laws. And this graphic, this cartoon is what it came up with. And I'm not on commission or anything. I think ChatGPT probably does okay without me extolling its virtues, but having never used it before, that's what it spat out. And I thought that was quite interesting in itself to share. So findings. This is the FOI response from the MPCC. The CRU had advised local police forces on 1,706 FOI requests in the first 3 months of 2024. And when I looked at the performance statistics, which are on the MPCC website for how many FOI requests forces respond to in the same quarter, that represented an equivalence of 1 in every 11 requests that are going to local police forces are going via the CRU for advice. I don't know whether that's a lot or not very many, but considering I've been FOI in police forces for the best part of 15 years and I'd never heard of the CRU until last year, I felt like that was a significant figure. From speaking to other journalists, I was able to find out that the CRU had also advised police forces to rescind earlier responses and swap for a neither confirm nor deny response when they were asked by Liberty Investigates how many times they'd been using the face recognition search engine PimEyes. And that had been banned by Scotland Yard. I'm not sure when it was banned. I'm not sure if it was banned on the back of reporting or before, but I just mention it because it's obviously an indicator of whether or not police officers should be using this search engine. But and then another interesting aspect of this was in the correspondence about advising those forces about what I'm going to call the PimEyes FOI. The CRU uses the phrase negative press. And I think that's quite interesting. And I'll come to that in a bit. But I'd be interested to get some thoughts from people in the group, actually, whether negative press is a significant thing to record when you're trying to find out about whether something's been in the public domain or not. Personally, I'm obviously biased. I'm a member of the media, but I don't think negative press comes into it. I think whether something's been in the public domain, i.e. coverage, without the preface negative, I think that might be relevant. I think negative press, actually that value judgment, I think is quite significant. I don't think negative press is relevant. I think it's just press or it's not. It's a binary consideration. But the CRU as well is asking, or rather recording, the organisation of the requester, i.e. the person who's made the request to the local police forces. They're recording the organisation, and they've been in internal discussions mentioning when FOI responses would likely attract media attention. Again, I wonder. I don't think that these considerations are relevant. But interesting to hear people's views later. When I'm aware I can see as I sort of go through the slides, there's a couple of questions in the chat. Can I just quickly check? I don't want to I don't want to bamboozle people with my timelines if they're not clear. So is it best to have a quick pause and try and pick up the questions in the chat just to make sure that this is clear the way I'm going through it? Because as I said at the top, I haven't actually, these are new slides for this purpose, and I've not tried them out yet. So I've got no idea if this makes sense to people who are coming to this report completely fresh.
No, I think it's making sense for me. Everybody else on the call nodding, saying yeah, following along so far. Yeah, Merle's giving us a thumbs up, Davies. Yeah, don't worry, Alex. I think people are following along with you quite happy.
Okay, cool. But if you get a question, please, I'm not keeping an eye on the chat. So if you get a question come up in the chat that's best for me to take straight away, just shout me and I'll pipe down. I'll quickly take a question. As I said, I know this jumps around a little bit, but when sort of trying to put in FOI requests to the MPCC, obviously I effectively had 4 goes at sending in FOI requests, and in the responses, one of the things that came across in the response was under FOI or under FOIA, whichever we prefer to say, the MPCC had said it couldn't share records of when it had conducted public interest tests, nor if and when it had favoured disclosure of information. Now, I think that is interesting in the context of an organisation that says about itself that it is a centre of excellence when it comes to FOI. Because I think FOI, rightly or wrongly, I think FOI is intrinsically linked with good record keeping and structure and central records. And I think in the context of a team that is its principles seem to be so centrally linked with responding to FOI requests. I don't know why that wouldn't be a piece of information that's recorded centrally when you're giving advice on that scale to police forces, especially when the law actually favours disclosure. We also found, I also found out that the CRU had so-called mandatory referral topics. So that means to say when a local police force received an FOI about one of its mandatory referral topics, the CRU wanted that police force to contact the CRU for advice. But it didn't have any kind of flag for how many times it had advised, or it didn't have any kind of consistent flagging system for how many times it had given advice on its own mandatory referral topics. And then talking to another colleague, George Greenwood, used to work for the BBC, now works at the Times. He'd also had from a subject access request, he could show me that the CRU had advised on multiple FOI requests of his own. The reason I mentioned that because I would go on to do something else later myself. The topics that the CRU is advising on. Copies of press office correspondence about the vigil related to the death of Sarah Everard that was held at Clapham Common when children have had tasers deployed on them by police officers. These are some of the mandatory referral topics. So this is what was disclosed to me in my FOI request. So these were the ones that were in place in the 3 months that I mentioned they gave me figures for. I don't know if anyone wants to just go through those in their own time, but the ones that sort of are red flags to me: information received from or which relates to certain partner agencies, major or complex incidents or investigations or operations, requests with potentially significant reputational implications. So the reason they're red flags to me is because I think the phrasing is vague, like major or complex incidents. I mean, what does that cover? And reputational implications, again, I don't think is relevant to whether something's legally able to be disclosed or not. Like it's either disclosable or it's not, and it's covered by a very significant piece of law. You know, like it's not guesswork. This and these, if you so OPTALAC, for those reading the temporary mandatory referrals at the bottom, I think, if I remember rightly, OPTALAC, Operation Tarlac, is the policing of protests related to conflicts in Gaza. And the Angiolini inquiry, I think, is the inquiry into the related to the Metropolitan Police, which again is linked to the murder of Sarah Everard. I hope that makes sense to give that bit of context. So I mentioned this, that the press office had been talking to the CRU about me. It's clearly about me because it says Alex from BBC, and it's been disclosed to me in response to a subject access request. So as you see the text of the email, this is the press office writing to the CRU. Thank you for this. Can I confirm Alex from BBC has asked for police records for the list of synthetic opioids attached. It was declined due to sensitivities, and he has complained that it was declined. It's a slightly erroneous summary of what's happened, but my question has still not been answered satisfactorily. Why is the press office aware of an FOI request that I've made to different police forces? Why is it talking to the CRU about this FOI request? Why does it know that it's been submitted? Like, why is it relevant that it's me? Just why is the press office involved? There's just so many whys. And how, like, how is this information being shared? And more whys, why is it being shared with the press office? Why the press office looped into this? When presenting my findings to various different organisations, I've just put like truncated quotes from the people's reactions here. But Jake Herfert, who's head of research and investigations at Big Brother Watch campaign organisation, he said the MPCC pressurising police forces to retract data disclosed in response to journalists' freedom of information requests, and instead try to refuse to confirm or deny that they hold the data they've already released, is the practice of an that's easy for me to say, is the practice of an authoritarian censor, not an accountable public body. It is alarming that the MPCC is going beyond giving advice to individual forces and instead seemingly orchestrating how every force responds to sensitive transparency requests, including ones about the Sarah Everard inquiry. This behaviour smacks of the Cabinet Office's Orwellian clearinghouse, which frustrated the release of information. I think we've already had a presentation in previous NADPO webinars about the clearinghouse, so I won't go on to talk about the clearinghouse. This is from Akiko Hart, the director of Liberty, human rights campaigning organisation. It's incredibly concerning that police have continually tried to downplay, hide and rescind information that is in the public interest. Freedom of information requests are vital in ensuring transparency between individuals and public bodies and in holding power to account. FOI requests provide a route to justice for those who have had their rights breached by the state. That this unit was consulted to control what information was released by police poses serious questions as to what information was withheld. And I won't read it all, but. And then Martin Rosenbaum, I mentioned his previous role at the BBC because that's obviously where I first know him, but he was an author in his own right. The ICO has taken enforcement action against 15 police forces because of their FOI failings, which is more than 1 in 3 forces nationally and is the worst record of any part of the public sector. And Claire Miller, who is for those who don't know Claire, who's on the call, Claire was previously the data journalism editor at the Reach Publishing Group. So a journalist, and she's a frequent requester of FOI. She's run tribunals, etc. There needs to be more investigation into how the CRU is operating because it does not just seem to be operating within the spirit of the FOI Act. As a unit with similarities to the Cabinet Office clearinghouse, I think what Claire means there is in the sense that it's a sort of advisory central organisation. It does not seem to have taken on board the criticisms of and recommendations for the clearinghouse, which perhaps it should have done. And that's referring back to the findings of the review into the clearinghouse by Sue Langley, which advised it needs to change its practices. And here I've, as I say on the foot of this is the press statement provided by the Information Commissioner's Office. I've put my emphasis in red font here. So the ICO, we've used our powers proactively numerous times over the last 2 years to ensure police forces across the country are complying with information rights law. We will continue to take action when necessary, including, and then this is my emphasis, keeping under review whether any central coordination in this sector is having a negative impact on compliance with the law when we examine the complaints that come to us. And the reason I've emphasised that in red is because if I go back a couple of slides, if you remember, one of the mandatory referral topics which the CRU uses is complaints to the Information Commissioner. So when a police force receives a complaint to the Information Commissioner, the CRU is saying, come to us, we'll help you with that complaint. And then the ICO is saying, we're going to review any complaints about the CRU when we get complaints made to us. So the ICO is saying that it's going to review any negative impact of coordination from complaints if it's relevant to the complaint, if it comes up in the complaint, but the CRU will have advised on that very complaint. And that is a tension, I think, that is going to come out and will prove problematic in the ICO being able to enforce this, because the extent to which the CRU is involved in the police response to the ICO may not actually be apparent immediately to the ICO, I don't think, unless it's proactively asked for and sought by case officers. So this is trying to get answers from the MPCC. So I know that on the call, it's obviously presumably, I might get this wrong, sorry, but I'm presuming that most people on the call are professionals in transparency law and data protection. But the process with regards journalism is, you put your allegations, your findings, your accusations, if you like, you put that to the person that is, the subject of those complaints or those accusations or those allegations, and they are given the opportunity to respond. They don't always take it, and they don't always get offered the opportunity, but that's the process that should happen, and that's what happened here. Note the date here. This is February, start of February 2025. This is when we're trying to get this report. That's what I'm trying to publish. The MPC issues this statement, which is not attributed to anybody at the organisation. Policing is firmly committed to being open and transparent, and the Freedom of Information Act 2000 is just one way we remain accountable to the public. We always strive to share as much as we can in our responses. However, due to the nature of police work, there are circumstances where information cannot be disclosed and needs to be redacted, and on occasions withheld. These instances are strictly sanctioned with clear parameters and are not used to withhold information of our choosing. So this is an organisation that is claiming transparency and accountability, and at the same time has given me a press statement which is not attributed to anybody in the organisation. That does not stand up to scrutiny as an organisation that is accountable, because there's no one accountable. That's the whole point. It's just a nameless spokesperson at the moment. So this is my reply to the MPCC. Now, this is not something I would normally disclose, and that's why I was a little bit hesitant to sort of allow this call to be recorded, to be honest. But this is something that I thought was interesting for explaining how this report happened. So this is what I'm sending back to the MPCC in response to that statement. I don't think is sufficient. It's attributed to a nameless spokesperson. And I've asked for a pre-recorded TV or radio interview, and the interview's been declined. We cannot give an interview. I've not asked for a time, date, or location for this interview, and yet the organisation is able to say it cannot give me an interview at all. That's amazing availability, or lack of availability, in my view, that nobody could do this interview ever. So I've said there, the statement doesn't address the questions. It's unusable as it stands. And that's quite an unusual thing to do these days. I don't think organisations are used to being told, I'm not using your statement. I'm not just going to copy and paste your statement because it doesn't answer my question. And then I've put in red there. I've had to put it in small font because, as you'll see, please answer my question in turn. I've highlighted in red my original questions below, which I don't believe have been answered by the statement as it stands. You don't have to read all the questions, but you'll see from the amount of text that's there in red, there's a fair bit of my questions which I don't think has been answered. So this is the response to me complaining about the statement. Thanks for coming back to me. Please reference the statement we provided in your piece. It would be unfair to say the MPCC refused to answer, as we provide you with the below comment. Now, hold my hand up as the journalist here. I think if you're asked a direct question and you don't give an answer, and you send something anodyne that's not referencing the question, you have refused to answer the question. That's what that means. On this occasion, we cannot provide a recorded interview, and the statement I provided to you stands. That's a very polite way of obviously writing, please copy and paste the statement that you've been sent. Anyway, we had a bit of a further discussion, and I received an amended statement later with background to editors. So that's background to editors is a form of notes that's normally amended to a statement, and it's organizations sort of like you to use that in shaping your reporting. But these are the notes to editors. My emphasis in red. The unit acts. This is a summarized version of the notes to editors as well. It was very long. So as I said, my emphasis in red. The unit, the CRU, acts in an advisory capacity. Forces remain the decision makers. So I'll leave that up to you to see what you think as we go through more of this. The CRU is currently making some changes, including introducing a new case management system that will enable further performance reporting and reviewing governance structures. So we're going to have better records. I'd asked them about how much work they'd had over the years. It has seemingly dropped from 2020, when they had more than 2,000, to 1,123. The volumes in their volume of inquiries do not match with the FOI response. So how the volume of inquiries differs from number of FOI requests receiving advice broken down by police force, I don't know. And that remains unanswered. Records. So I've asked them about their record keeping. We do record when requests are national, regional, or local, and examples of public interest tests are recorded on our case management system. If requested through the FOI, the retrieval via the current case management system may not fall within legislative time and cost limits, depending on what the FOI request is. So we are saying, so that this, having refused my FOI for this very information, the MPCC is now saying that that stuff is available. It's just that it can't come out through FOI. And that sort of again begs further questions, because if it's central records, why can't it? If it's held in a central way, why can't it be FOIable? So this is the key distinction here, which is the CRU says it recommends responses are made erroneous and a new response issued. It's not saying that it has to happen. It's a recommendation. It's got mandatory referrals, but what it sends back is a recommendation. There's a tension there. The principle of FOI teams being applicant blind is not set out in law, but it is a principle recommended by the ICO for FOI decision makers. While the CRU is not a decision maker and legally able to have access to applicant names provided by police forces, the head of unit has reviewed its process around recording names on FOI requests, and from March 2025, it will no longer ask for the applicant's name or organisation from forces who refer to us. I would love to hear feedback from any data protection people on the call, which I presume is everyone, about that statement. Because in my view, rightly or wrongly, I believe I've given my data to police forces for the purposes of answering my FOI requests. I have not given permission, and I've not given my data to the MPCC. So how the MPCC can record that, I do not know. Again, this is advice only from the CRU. We have discussed, this is at the bottom, references to media retention or reporting. We do discuss media retention or reporting. That's mentioned in the correspondence, but the emails do not show it influencing the disclosure decision. MPCC press office. So this is about why I've asked, why is my email being, why my FOI request being discussed with the press office before I spoke to you. MPCC press office has no involvement in the decision-making processes about advice issued to police forces. That's correct. That's exactly the situation. It should be the case. So why does it then? That question remains exactly as it's put to them. If it's not involved, why does it know about my FOI request to police forces? And that question's still not been answered satisfactorily. This is something I never used before either, but I've done a lot of experimenting for this slideshow. This is when you can analyze the difference in text. So all I've put in here is I've put in the original press statement from the MPCC, which was attributed to nobody, not a named spokesperson. And then I've put in the actual quote the MPCC wished me to use, which was attributed to a named spokesperson later. And it highlights the differences in red and green. And one of the lines that has been removed from the original statements is, I don't know why this has been removed, but I'm just saying it's been removed. Information cannot be disclosed and needs to be redacted and on occasions withheld. The parameters, as in of FOI, are not used to withhold information of our choosing. Now, when that statement was amended, that line, the parameters are not used to withhold information of our choosing. I think if that was your view and you wanted to be strong in saying that, I think you keep that exact sentence. But for whatever reason, before this statement was amended, and I stress there was no emphasis given to me that the statement had been changed. That disappeared. Parameters are not used to withhold information about choosing. And again, that same emphasis. Complaints about police application of the FOI can be referred to the Information Commissioner's Office. Yes, they can be, but the CRU is also involved in drafting the complaints responses. So it's been a long journey, my slideshow, and hopefully it hasn't been too difficult to follow. But after 14 months on and off of trying to look into what the CRU was actually doing and why, we end up with a report. And as I said, through the call, obviously I talked to other journalists to see if they had experience of the CRU as well. And Jenna Cordroy, who many of you will know, had also been had a similar experience to me with regards her FOIs receiving CRU advice. Now, what's happened since publication? So, as I said earlier on, when I first became aware that the CRU was a concept, was a phenomenon, was when I saw the correspondence from police, and I'd asked for this very tight time frame subject access request in the first part of 2024. What do you hold about me? And when I started to speak to other journalists who had experience of the CRU, I thought, well, what if there's more about me? You know, what if I've just never known that this unit was operating in the background the whole time? So I submitted a supplementary subject access request for any information held about me, either in my BBC role or in my previous roles. And I saw that the CRU has advised on multiple FOI requests I've made to either forces for, sort of for specific inquiry, or for national requests, as they call them, or some people might call them round robin requests to police forces. I mean, this is honestly 10 years of FOI requests I've been making, and I had never heard of the CRU, and yet it's been involved in so many responses to me over my career that I'm now trying to find out more about why and what, to why police forces were involving this organisation. Again, I don't understand this either. This is obviously a screen grab from a subject access request. why is the source relevant? Why is the fact that I'm media relevant to the application of a piece of law about whether information can be disclosed? And as I say, that the CRU says itself that it is advisory only. Just have a look at this. Is the what the CRU says to other police forces. Just any request referred must not be answered until a final response has been received from the CRU, unless otherwise stated from the team. And I'll just give that question to you lot. What do you think? Like, is this advice or is it a 3-line whip here? If it's that the CRU is an advisory organisation and the force is the decision maker, why is this the case? Any request referred must not be answered until a final response has been received from the CRU, unless otherwise stated. If your force, underlined for emphasis, if your force is considering making a disclosure prior to advice being issued, or if it does not intend to follow national guidance, please make contact as soon as possible. Who is the decision maker here? Just because you may never have heard about my team, I've included a little bit of information about the sort of stuff that we do. We cover a range of topics, and it just so happened that looking into synthetic opioids led me down a completely different path, and I started reporting on the CRU. But I think there may be some more reports to come on this particular topic of the CRU and its involvement in FOIs. And we're part of the shared data unit's part of a 3-pronged scheme to support the regional news sector. So my team does data-led investigations that we share with the regional news. And you may have heard of local democracy reporters. This scheme also funds a lot of reporters who cover public bodies and their public meetings, and they share all of their reports. And then there's a third part, and that's the News Hub. And that's where the BBC makes available footage from various reports and TV packages for use if wanted by the regional news sector. And that is me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alex, so much.
What are we saying on the time? How was that? That's like
not too bad. Only a few minutes over. Yeah, not bad.
all right.
Well
I'll
done.
take that. Is it okay if I stop this share and I'll
yeah,
take
of course.
questions?
Of course.
Yeah,
lots of people making comments in the chat. I think, those of us that have worked in FOI for any time, we're very familiar with the clearinghouse, the Cabinet Office clearinghouse, and our government justified some of it by saying they're one government and they can share data. This is pushing it, in my opinion. I don't know how other people feel, but I popped in the chat as you were talking, Alex. I went on the website, on the MPC website, because I was thinking, what's their legal status? What are they? Who's the data controller in all of this? And I'm fascinated by the wording, the legal status. It says a collaboration body. I mean, what's that when it's it's a partnership, isn't it? It's a fluffy partnership. So if I think about how we work in public sector and we have partnerships, for example, let's say you've got local councils and we all get together and we have a partnership of local councils. We're all still independent data controllers. Now, even if we've got information sharing agreements between us that say, if you get a freedom of information request that affects us, let us know. We still wouldn't be referring that FOI to their press team in a million years. It just doesn't work like that. We wouldn't be revealing who put it in.
The other thing, which is so significant for me, is about the steps removed. Like, I've submitted the FOI to local police forces.
Yeah.
It's not their press office.
Yeah.
It's the NPCC's press office.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think it's the really weird way the police structure things sometimes, and how they have that hierarchy and they have that national oversight. And you see it even when you do look at who a data controller of the police is. It isn't that police force. It's the chief constable himself is the data controller, and police are not employees. It doesn't work like that. They have some really weird setups, so that's how they get away with doing some of this. But I think, Deborah said in the chat, if it's a collaboration, who's it accountable to? Really good question, isn't it? Who's a partnership accountable to?
I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, the that is the question. Like, but I think that means more. The accountability is obviously a concept that, in terms of accountability, I always think of the accountability to the public, and that's how I think of accountability. Like, it's not reporting lines; it's you're policing for the public good. So if the public think you're doing something dodgy,
Yeah.
then that's what the reaction will be.
The other thing that I popped in the chat was the privacy notice as well. I went and looked at the privacy notice just to see if there's anything on there that would make me think, looking at it, oh, this is what you do with FOI requests. And there isn't. There's a little bit of a mention about collaborating on information management in there. But if
So
I'm, as a
I have a
requester, I would not read that privacy policy
so I've
and
got a
think
question for the. Is it
they do
okay if
it.
I sort of reverse the roles here a little bit and ask a question to the group, if
Yeah.
that's not too much of an overreach?
Mm.
So I shared earlier on. If I can share screen again for only for 30 seconds for this particular email. I shared this slide earlier on from the. This is the press office email to the CIU again. Note the
Yeah.
date as well, 30th of April 2024. I'll just stop the share because it's boring to leave it on. But 30th of April 2024, they're talking about Alex from BBC. I asked a further FOI for correspondence between the press office and CIU over the calendar year 2024. This is getting very meta, I appreciate, but I did because I think it's interesting I think it is significant to why that's happening. My FOI request returned a nil return. So bear in mind, I've just screenshotted the email, which we know was a thing, and there was a nil return. I then said, when I got a nil return, I asked for internal review because I said, well, I've got this subject access request, which suggests there is something there. So your searches have not been exhaustive.
Yeah.
So please have another go. And the internal review, which came back on Thursday before the Easter weekend, the response to the internal review says that we have checked again, and having done our internal review, we can confirm that our response was correct because we can't find anything. So again, to the group, I would be interested to know. So I'm sort of, this is quite specialized, but what is the data retention schedule? Because that is an email that has happened less than 12 months ago.
Yeah.
And this is an arm of the police.
Yeah, it'll be different for every organisation, won't it? For something like SARS and FOIAs, I mean, for most
I'm sure it is.
organisations, you're
I'm sure
probably
it is.
looking at 2 or 3 years, probably.
But I'd be interested to know why that email from fewer than 12 months ago cannot be searched again, because that to me seems like a deleted email. And if it's a deleted email, if that's the first email in a thread that's only been provided under subject access request, I want to see the thread. And if that's been deleted, that is suspicious.
Yeah, it is. I think what you've been doing and digging has been brilliant and eye-opening, and long may it continue. Short of time now, so got to move on. Have a look through the chat, Alex, at some of the stuff. People, if you want to get in touch with Alex about any of it, do so.
Yeah, I'd be really interested.
Yeah, really interesting point about the principle of using neither confirm nor deny. You know, so often, I think that's another topic we could spend a long time on if we had time today, which we don't, but we might come back and revisit that. So thank you, Alex. Really appreciate it. I'm going to move on to Dave now. Dave, sorry, we've kept you waiting a little bit, but I know you've got a bit of a shorter presentation, so I hope you don't mind too much. I'm going to hand over to Dave Morris now, who's from the campaign opposing police surveillance. We're on the police again today. Sorry, guys, if any of you are from the police and we're picking on you. Take it away, Dave.
So yeah, thank you for inviting me. I think it's a great honour, an opportunity to talk about something maybe a bit it's connected to the previous speaker, but actually it's quite shocking what I'm going to be talking about. So basically, I've been a community activist and a radical activist since the mid-1970s, and for the purpose of this presentation, the key kind of period is really from the 1980s up till now. In the 1980s, I was involved with London Greenpeace, an independent Greenpeace organisation, the original Greenpeace actually in Europe, and in particular, a campaign against McDonald's, which we were sued over in the 90s, and it became the longest trial in English legal history, the McLibel trial, which you may or may not have heard of. Obviously, I'll go into that in more detail. That was a bit of a sidetrack for me, because actually what I really want to do is be involved with community action in my local community. And since that all kind of wound up, I've been back in my local community, Haringey in North London, and I'm involved with lots of community groups and community networks. And in fact, I'm currently now, my main thing has been parks, improving parks and involving and empowering people to be involved with their local parks. And I'm now chair of the National Federation of Parks and Green Spaces, which is the umbrella organisation for the movement of 7,000 local Friends of Parks groups across the UK. However, I've been dragged back into to my deep, dark past, thanks to the emergence of the Spy Cops scandal, which I've been heavily involved in campaigning around. In fact, I helped to expose the secret unit that was in the Metropolitan Police that was spying on campaign groups, a wide range, for over 50, well, for about 50 years. So that's kind of who I am. But it's very interesting to hear Alex talking about neither confirm nor deny tactic from the police, which has been heavily used to try to counter the growing publicity and scandal over the Spy Cops. So I'll come to that in a minute. So Alex said earlier on about the police, what if the public think that you're doing something dodgy? Is that going to be good for the police? Well, probably one of the dodgiest things the police, certainly in London, the Metropolitan Police, have ever been involved with was the Spy Cop scandal, which I'll come to. So my talk has been about turning the tables on the Spy Cops, and that's what we've been trying to do. But going back to the 1980s, London Greenpeace was campaigning on a wide range of environmental and social issues, including exposing corporations. And unbeknown to us, that attracted infiltration by the Metropolitan Police into the group. They were infiltrating and reporting on secretly, that we later found out, over 1,000 different campaign groups, but they had a particular interest in London Greenpeace. And one of our campaigns was of particular interest to them, was a campaign to bring together the various criticisms made by various movements about McDonald's, the junk food corporation. And we produced a fact sheet, which is called What's Wrong with McDonald's? Everything They Don't Want You to Know. Now, this was only produced really in a couple of, 2,000 or 3,000. But again, unbeknownst to us, McDonald's infiltrated London Greenpeace. London Greenpeace is a small collective, open collective with open weekly meetings, maybe attracting between 15 and 25, 30 people. But McDonald's sent infiltrators into the group, which we later found out about. And then very much later, only recently, we also found out that there were 2 police infiltrators as well. So it's a very murky situation, especially when it comes to the protection of data. You couldn't get more unprotected than having infiltrators active, not only within the group, but in people's social lives. And indeed, possibly the biggest controversy that's come out about the spy cops is that they were engineering sexual relationships with women activists to bolster their cover and gain information on movements. So anyway, going back to the 1980s, we received a writ from McDonald's, and we formed a campaign. It's a libel writ. They accused us of libeling their company, their lovely company, which could never do any wrong, of course. They've got a $2 billion a year budget, or they did at the time, promoting themselves. So you would expect that they would expect to have people put an alternative point of view, and the public indeed would expect nutritionists and labor movement and people concerned with children's, advertising directed at children and farming issues, animal welfare, and so on. You would expect people would be putting an alternative point of view. Anyway, we had a trial, and it became the longest trial in English legal history. However, there was all kinds of controversies to do with it. And I'm going to try and run through this to give people a little bit of time at the end to ask questions on the issues that maybe resonate with you and you want to know more about. So one of the key things, well, there's so much to say about that trial. One of the key things is that we launched a defiance campaign, in that they were trying to stop us giving out leaflets that were given out in thousands when we were sued. By the end of the trial, were being given out in millions all over the world. So in terms of suppressing criticism, it was an utter disaster for McDonald's. And as part of that campaign, possibly the first corporate or anti-corporate website, McSpotlight, was set up by activists in the mid-1990s. And the internet was a completely new thing at that stage in terms of its public presence. And that website put all of the information it could from that trial on that website so that everybody in the world could find out what was going on. And also, of course, copies in, I think, 23 different languages of leaflets that McDonald's were trying to suppress. A major thing during the trial was disclosure of documents. And I think this is something that probably you're interested in, is that there's nothing like a court case to actually force those that would want to suppress information to start handing it over. And we, during that trial, I think we got about 40,000 pages of documents about McDonald's, which had a big impact on them trying to, for failing to deny that many of our allegations were in fact true about their practices. So that was particularly important, disclosure. But secondly, part of that disclosure revealed to us that we'd clearly had spies from McDonald's in the group. So we were able to get their notes of the meetings they attended and call them as witnesses. In fact, one of them was so disgusted by what she had been doing that she offered to be a witness for us. So that all came out. One of the things that it turned out that the McDonald's spies had done was they had meetings, secret meetings with special branch of the Metropolitan Police. This and they were given information, personal information about us, before McDonald served the writs on us, like our home addresses and in fact some other information that turned out to be not true. So after the McLibel trial, and I think possibly before or after we appealed on certain issues, we won, by the way, we won lots of points at the trial, but we lost on other issues, and then there was an appeal. And then, to cut a long story short, we won more points at the appeal, and then we went to the European Court and we won in the European Court in 2005. We were sued in 1990. The trial started in 1994 and lasted 313 days. Something that you may be interested in is that a very young radical barrister offered to help us at the beginning with legal advice, because there's no legal aid to defend yourself against libel, defamation suits. His name was Keir Starmer, and I have to say he was a very good lawyer, and he didn't realise, of course, when he offered to help us, it would become such a long case. And he did so for nothing, and then eventually we managed to get legal aid for the European application, which we won. It turned out, well, I'll come to that later when we get to the police. So, okay, that's the trial. There were two of us on trial, myself and Helen Steele. Helen Steele, we were the two defendants, the McLibel two, had a relationship with another member of London Greenpeace in the late 1980s, who in 1992 or so suddenly had a mental breakdown and disappeared completely from her life. They were living together. And throughout the trial, she was trying to find out who he was, well, where, what had happened to him. And she spent, 10, 15 years looking for him. And everywhere she looked, it was like a blank canvas. Until, I think, after the trial had finished, she managed to track down family, found out his real name, and it turned out he had been on his birth certificate, or on his marriage certificate, he was an ex-police officer, which then raised all kinds of questions. Why was he involved with London Greenpeace? So after the trial, I kind of, both me and Helen, we both lived in Tottenham, in Haringey, North London. We got back involved with community activities in, locally. She carried on, trying to track this guy down. And it turns out that she found out that he was a police officer. At the same time, she discovered that another person in the group, London Greenpeace, who called himself Bob Robinson, she managed to track down that he became an academic, well, in his real persona, but we didn't realize, we thought he was an activist. It turned out that he had also been an ex-special branch officer who was now an academic. And me and Helen and others from London Greenpeace in 2011 confronted him at a conference and accused him of being a police spy in London Greenpeace and having 4 relationships with women associated with the group, one of which fathered a child. And he then abandoned her and the child and apparently disappeared off the face of the earth, but in fact went back into special branch, into Metropolitan Police. Now, so Helen was one of the women who, as a result of their own detective work, managed to expose an increasing number of ex-partners being Metropolitan Police officers involved in this secret unit, the Special Demonstration Squad, who had been spying on hundreds of campaign groups over since 1968, when it was set up. The police response to these increasing revelations was neither confirm nor deny, which, as we've heard, is a useful obstructive tactic, as you probably guessed, coordinated at a national level. So a new campaign started, to expose the spy cops, and the scandals got into all the national media. The police were kind of neither confirming nor deny, even when police officers were admitting that they were indeed secret undercover agents. It became such a huge scandal that the Home Secretary at the time, Theresa May, ordered a public inquiry, which is now ongoing. In fact, it's been ongoing since 2015. And you'll be pleased to hear that we've just got up to about the early 1990s in the evidence hearings. It's been, the police have dragged it out as long as they possibly could. Mainly, their main tactic has been saying that their privacy rights of these officers has been, unless there were anonymity agreements or on their real name, they've made hundreds of applications to remain anonymous because of their privacy rights. It's interesting how the police are very concerned about privacy rights when it comes to protection of their officers, but not of the thousands of people that they were spying on, writing secret reports about, sending the information, as we found out, systematically to MI5, who are building up tens of thousands of additional files on activists. So we have now been, as a result of the inquiry, and this is another opportunity, because it's a statutory tribunal, to force disclosure. And we've now been given tens of thousands of documents, which interestingly mainly come from, that were created by the SDS and undercover police, that were given to MI5. Most of the SDS own storage, most of the documents seem to have been destroyed by the police, but they were kept by MI5, who have been cooperating with the inquiry, interestingly enough. So these documents are highly revealing, highly shocking, often inaccurate, but show the pattern of police involvement over many decades. In terms of McDonald's, guess who was one of the authors, or possibly the most famous leaflet in the world, What's Wrong with McDonald's and its various versions, was Bob Lambert, the SDS officer operating as Bob Robinson in London Greenpeace. He was one of the small group who helped to make that leaflet. And sorry, my phone's ringing, I'll just turn it off. He maintained a very close interest in the McLibel case. He and his colleague John Dines, who had had a relationship with Helen Steele, my co-defendant, monitored our meetings with Keir Starmer and the advice that we were getting at the beginning, particularly at the beginning of the case, and were reporting back not only to the SDS and MI5, but also to McDonald's. And we actually sued McDonald's in 1999. Sorry, the police, the Metropolitan Police in 1999, over their collaboration with McDonald's. But we had no idea from that meeting that the McDonald's spies had with the Special Branch. We had no idea that the Special Branch had also infiltrated London Greenpeace. And in fact, we made a subject access request during that trial, which Keir Starmer made on our behalf, to the Metropolitan Police to release all relevant documents that the police had on me and Helen and on their collaboration with McDonald's. And we got, I think I got 16 pages, half of them redacted. But as a result of this inquiry, I've had thousands of pages of documents released to me, and so has Helen. So you can see the police will do whatever they can to try to obstruct transparency when it suits them. Okay, so to kind of pull it together, finish it off, yes, in terms of the spy cops, we have turned the tables. It is a huge scandal. There was recent documentary on ITV about the women's efforts to find out the truth. And I've put in the chat a link to the McLibel documentary, which was made before we knew about the police involvement, but certainly has interviews with Keir Starmer and also about the police spies, and also the whole case. But however, just looking at this effort made by police, the spy cops, to undermine movements for real change, I just wanted to go through to ask who was on the right side of history. So it started off when they were trying to infiltrate the campaign against the Vietnam War. The result of that is the Vietnam War was an utter disaster for the US military. They infiltrated anti-apartheid campaigns, including Peter Hain, who famously was the face of the anti-apartheid movement in this country and later became a Labour minister in the government. Apartheid was overthrown. Greenham Common, they infiltrated Greenham Common campaign. Cruise missiles at Greenham Common were never brought in as a result of that campaign. You can go through a whole series of movements that they targeted. Hunting, they've had a particular obsession with hunt sabotage groups who are trying to stop hunting. Blood sports, that's now been made illegal. Blacklisting, which MI5 is particularly prominent in, and that's why they were welcoming all these files from the Metropolitan Police. The blacklisting database held by the Consumers Association was declared illegal. I was on it actually. It was mainly construction workers that were on it. But blacklisting basically is illegal, blacklisting trade unionists from getting jobs because of their trade union activities. And we can move on to other areas that they targeted. Police, family justice campaigns. They monitored and observed the Stephen Lawrence campaign to try and smear the Lawrence family. And we know that that campaign has really made a big impact, and the police have been forced to accept public accountability from family justice campaigns and also police accountability groups, which they hate, and so on. So my final message is transparency is very important. accountability for public organisations and corporations in particular, but even better would be that we actually change the world so that ordinary people are actually in control of the decision making, and the right decisions are being made, rather than have people that have organisations that are committed only to power and profit actually being in power in our world. So that's my message, really, is if anybody can help campaign movements to get the information they need so that they can hold those in power to account, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dave. Absolutely fascinating. I think, you know, some of us that have been around a few years maybe know you a little bit from the construction story from previously, but thanks for updating us on the newer stuff. Just a quick one from me. Do you ever feel completely paranoid and that they're just watching you all the time now?
It's funny, like during the McLibel case, people say, aren't you worried about McDonald's like bumping you off or something? And I'll say the opposite. If anybody wanted to bump me off, McDonald's would get the blame. It's in their interest to make sure nobody bumped me off.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So, you know, I mean, yeah. I mean,
Glad you can still smile about it.
I did say during the case, you know, well, in fact, when Helen suspected in London Greenpeace there were McDonald's spies, I did say, I remember saying to her clearly, you know, that's paranoia. That's just the stuff you read about in books. But actually, it turned out she was absolutely right.
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
was worse than she thought.
Quick question from Alex in the chat. He says, so the undercover policeman reported back to McDonald's about leaflets that McDonald's tried to argue were libelous, which he had actually created in his undercover role. Who do you think would have been actually responsible or liable for any compensation or damages if it had been,
so during the trial, we tried to join the McDonald's spies as witnesses, not witnesses, sorry, as co-defendants in a sort of deft legal maneuver, which Keir Starmer helped us with.
That's what I tried as well.
The judge rejected it on the grounds that they had a justified reason for doing what they did, in that they were trying to find out who actually was distributing the leaflets that they wanted to sue over. However, during the trial, we now know from the Spy Cops disclosure that Bob Lambert was trying to prevent Helen Steele finding John Dines, because if she found him, we could join him as a co-defendant, and indeed the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, as co-defendants in the libel case for his role in distributing the leaflets, John Dines. And then, of course, Bob Lambert was one of the authors of the leaflets. So it would have blown away at that time, the SDS's secrecy. So yes, it's an extremely murky world that has become revealed as a result of all this campaigning.
Wow. And it's the sort of thing that you expect other countries to do, isn't it? Unbelievably, I've not told many people of this, but unbelievably, I run a local food bank. I'm a director of our local food bank, and we were actually infiltrated by someone from the Secret Service equivalent from Iran who were spying on some of the Iranian asylum seekers that we were helping. And you're just like, what do you mean there's an Iranian Secret Service agent at my food bank? This is insane. And that's the sort of nutty things they do. But, you know, that our government have been doing it regularly and our police have been doing it regularly is
yes,
you know,
and it's
happening everywhere, isn't it?
We can kind of laugh about it, but then actually it could be extremely serious for those Iranian people.
Absolutely.
Also, the SDS, Special Demonstration Squad, was, you know, their main client was MI5. They were giving all the documentation to MI5. Now, MI5 they were doing reports, the SDS, on anti-apartheid groups that were challenging the South African government, including on all the individuals involved, some of which would have been South African exiles. And BOSS, the Secret Service for South Africa, was notorious. And in London, anti-apartheid bookshop was bombed by BOSS Secret Service people. And so it's actually quite serious for the British special branch to be collaborating with these foreign special branch organisations.
Okay,
And
thank
the
you very
police were
much.
collaborating with that through this secret unit.
Yeah. Brilliant session today. I think everybody's found it really interesting. Lovely that the two linked up, you know, and I'm sure we're going to see lots of neither confirm nor denies in various responses for some
I'm glad
time
I went first, though.
come yet. You what, Alex?
I said I'm glad I went first. That would have been a bit tough to follow. Yeah. Dave,
Thank
you're
you so much
fantastically
to both
brave.
of
I'm
our
just saying that on the
speakers.
call.
Thank you to Merle for organising it as usual. Just a quick reminder, we will be having another in-person conference. Not content with just doing our AGM one, we are doing a regional conference in June in Birmingham. Hopefully you've all had newsletters and emails about it. Links in the chat. Book your tickets now. And we will be back next month with another webinar. So that's it from us today. Bye everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.